Hi, I'm Kitsap County Commissioner Rob Gelder, and welcome to this episode of Commissioner's Corner. Today we're going to learn all about the Salish Sea Expeditions, and so you'll want to stay tuned to learn a lot more. Welcome back, and thanks for joining me here on this wonderful, beautiful, sunny, warm day. We are floating in the middle of Eagle Harbor and Bainbridge Island to learn all about the Salish Sea Expeditions. And joining me today is Seth Muir, the Executive Director for the organization. And Seth, thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to be part of the program.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So I think to kind of start off our conversation and to really share with our viewers, what is the Salish Sea Expeditions and how did it come to be?
Yeah. So Salish Sea Expeditions is a 501c3 nonprofit. We've been operating for just over 21 years, based here on Bainbridge Island. And our work is designed to inspire curiosity, critical thinking, and confidence in students using boat-based education and scientific inquiry.
Okay. So 21 years, that seems like for most of our viewers who may not have heard of you before, you're kind of one of those best kept secrets. So really, what is the target audience for your programming?
Yeah, so our programming serves students in grades 5 through 12, but we find there are a couple of different sweet spots for the students that come out, particularly on the multi-day trips. 5th and 6th graders, while capable, still have a sense of wonder, and it's often the first time that they've conducted science research, and certainly the first time that they've ever done it in the marine environment. May even be the first time they've been on a ship or away from home overnight. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the top end, the juniors and seniors in high school, have a little bit more of a sophisticated understanding of the environment and of the scientific process, and they can take their research a little bit deeper than the younger kids.
Okay. Yeah, you kind of triggered a memory for me when I think about, I can't remember where the quote was, but you really look in this marina, we see everything from the waterline up, and there's a whole world down below. So that's the kind of the exciting thing for me when you came to my Rotary Club not too long ago to provide a program. It's really about sort of understanding and delving down in. And so when the students get on board, tell us a little bit about how they approach their experiments. What do they do?
Yeah, so our program actually starts prior to them arriving. We do 2 visits into the classroom.
Okay.
And at that time, we sync up with where the teachers have their class. So we want to understand, what do they know about the scientific process or the scientific method? What equipment do they know how to use? What's their facility with different equipment, their experience, the gear they're going to have? Mm-hmm. Then we create a research outline, and they create a specific project. They want to choose what variables they want to study, what are human impacts that perhaps they want to look at. We need to know what gear they need because we fully equip them with all of the equipment they might need, from foul weather gear to tents to food. We put together a float plan, and the students arrive for 3 to 5 days. When they come out on our ship, we immediately split them into 2 groups. One of them is focused on doing the science research, deploying the equipment, etc. The other is focused on learning how to operate the ship. And they switch places. So throughout the course of a few days, they each get an opportunity to do science research hands-on and to operate the ship. On the last day, they put it all together by doing a synthesis, operating all of the equipment, and steering the ship home.
That's cool. So where does the programming, so if they're sailing, do they stay in the local area, or where do they go?
So our ship is restricted to U.S. waters east of Port Angeles,
okay,
obviously south of the Canadian border. We typically run starting south to north during our seasons. So we'll start in either Olympia or Tacoma, come up to Seattle, Bainbridge, sometimes Gig Harbor, Bremerton, and then move up to Anacortes, where we do the lion's share of our programming up in the San Juans. The schools, however, come from all over the state, and a couple even come from out of state. So we're not necessarily operating in their home waters. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, for example, a school just came this year from Bremerton all the way up to Anacortes to do a trip.
Okay, so when you talk about your season, what does that mean?
So we typically operate spring and fall.
Okay.
So we share the vessel with a camp up on Orcas Island. They
Okay.
use her for the chunk of the summer, and in the winter, an open ship like ours is simply prohibitively wet for having the little kids on. This is actually the the reason for the second vessel that we're working on right now.
Okay, so tell us a little bit more about that. What is the second vessel?
Yeah, so we recognized a number of years ago that for our program to grow, we needed access to a vessel, especially on days like today in the summertime. So we purchased a boat 3 years ago that we've been working on retrofitting. She's over in a shipyard in Ballard, and we've been working on getting her Subchapter T compliant with a COI for 49 guests.
Okay, so
And-
those are acronyms.
Yes,
so
I apologize.
subchapter T and COI, what does that mean?
Subchapter T is a small passenger vessel, so
Okay.
you can take paying passengers. And a COI is a certificate of inspection that a vessel needs to take passengers such as students aboard.
And it's issued by the Coast Guard?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're working on both of those things while operating the sailboat.
Okay. So where are you at in the retrofitting of the boat?
Yeah, so the boat is still early days. We have done a tremendous amount of engineering. It was built as a yacht. And so this boat is requiring a tremendous amount of engineering. We've done some steel work, we've replaced some tail shafts. We're about halfway through the campaign.
Okay. So, and what's the magnitude of the campaign?
It's a $2.5 million campaign.
Okay. So you talk about 21 years of being in existence, and so how did you have a sailboat right from the beginning, or when did the partnership with the Camp on Orcas come about?
So the genesis of the program came about by the founders were two women who had been working on the Adventurous and at a camp up on Orcas Island, and they recognized that neither the vessel Adventurous nor the camp had a particularly rigorous science program, and they were fascinated by using the marine environment to get kids engaged in science. We all know that kids aren't engaging in science as much as we would like. Critical thinking is a key component of any job, really.
Right.
And so they had a very forward-thinking notion that they would use this dynamic resource to get kids interested in that process, and then they would carry that interest further into school and into careers. They went to both the camp and to a number of the local schools, and they said, let's figure out a way to make this partnership work. The schools were interested in programming during the school year, of course. The camp had a vessel, and the vessel they were using is not actually the one we have. They had a vessel and they said, there's a better boat for this purpose. And the boat was actually custom built to be shared between the organizations.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It is cool.
Yeah. So this is really, the success is built on partnerships, and that partnership with the schools is a big component. How do you find schools or interact with schools to actually say, we want to be part of this and want to engage?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the benefits of having been around for a long time is that we have a number of schools that are really committed to our program that come year after year after year. Additionally, teachers move around between schools.
Okay.
Sometimes administrators who have bought into our program leave, so we've had a very organic recruiting mechanism. However, as we've begun experimenting with different lengths of programs based on the needs of the community, we've been doing some very intentional outreach. So speaking at Rotary clubs, going to school board meetings. I present to a number of different organizations all around the state. And hopefully people watching this might be interested in signing their students up. All of that info is on our website.
Okay, and why don't you go ahead and give a shameless plug for your website. What's that address?
Absolutely. It's www.salish, which is SALISH.org.
Okay, and we'll make sure that we put that on the credits at the end of the program as well.
Thank you.
So what are some of the challenges in terms of working with kids? I mean, you operating a nonprofit that has this kind of a program.
Yeah. Well, nonprofits have their own challenges and their own blessings. I think that our biggest challenge has been getting the word out about what we do. And as you said, we're the best kept secret in this area. Part of the reason for that is that we are often off the dock. Our students are aboard up in the San Juan Islands or on Blake Island. And so people don't see that. Because we don't have a bricks and mortar facility like an aquarium or a science center, people don't have a place to come to see us. We have a very modest office here on Bainbridge Island, but it isn't a place that donors come to see the program. So we have relatively few engagement points. Probably our most successful community outreach is we do a science symposium in June, where all of our students come together to present their research. I feel like that is probably the most honest example of the work that we do on land, but the real magic happens out there in the marine environment, and not everybody gets to go out and see that. We do a couple of other fundraisers throughout the year, but those two tend to be for people who have a connection to us already.
Right.
So the average layperson finding out about us, that's a challenge, and one that we use programming like this to overcome.
So when they do the symposium, they can bring everybody together to share their research results. Where does that take place? And do you move it around so that you can touch base with different
We do move
communities?
it around, yeah. We've done it at different locations in Seattle until this year was the first year we actually moved it over here and did it on Bainbridge Island. We're not sure whether or not we're going to stay here this year. It somewhat depends on the schools that participate.
Okay.
Because in a different school year, we'll find that we have a lot of schools that are coming from the Seattle area and they can only attend the symposium if it's in their local region. So we may split it up and play with that over the years, but right now we're making an intentional push to work with more Kitsap County schools. So we wanted to bring the symposium over here and do things like this.
Okay, great. So how many students end up attending the symposium, would you
Gosh,
say?
we've had it go as big as 200
Wow.
and as small as 50.
Okay.
But they come in groups, they present a PowerPoint and their research. This year we did it in partnership with several other groups. We had Islandwood graduate students who had come out on the boat. We had Puget Sound Restoration Fund scientists come and present. And our vision this year was to show the continuum from the students who are just getting started in science and getting exposed to the maritime environment, all the way up to career professionals doing projects like the kelp rehabilitation project in Hood Canal that's potentially having massive impact at a global scale.
So, I mean, we talked about a little bit about challenges, but I would also, there's tremendous rewards, there's got to be, and you kind of touched on my question where you have this whole spectrum from the youth just kind of getting exposed to it to the professionals.
Okay.
And being around 21 years, do you have any stories about youth that may have been part of the program way back when that, you know, this really sparked something for them and they continued and it became their career?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. We have a whole litany of students who have continued on either in science or in maritime trades. We have instructors who have gone on to get PhDs and be professors. I think of one student in particular who came through as a student on an individual, we do an open enrollment program every year called Marine Leaders, where individual kids can sign up for a trip. And then they become a group and go out and do a research project. This young lady came out on the program and was seasick, actually had kind of a hard time with the trip, but really bonded with the staff. Years later, she was looking for a program to participate in, but she was homeless. She'd moved out of her house. Her family was having all sorts of problems. She lived over in Linwood. And she called us up out of the blue and said, I really want to come on this program, but I'm not even in school. Can I come? And we gave her a full scholarship. She came aboard. She was a hardworking, disciplined, eager young lady. When she finally did complete her high school, she came and worked for us. And she spent a season working as a deckhand for us. And then she ended up going to community college in Edmonds for marine biology.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
A great story. So it kind of touches on a little bit about how people can plug in to the program. So what are the different ways that people can get involved?
Yeah, so we're always looking for volunteers and participants from the board level to committees to various work groups to support our fundraising activities. With this new vessel, we have opportunities around that, from as simple as scraping and painting to finance to fundraising. There's always an emphasis in nonprofits on people who want to roll up their sleeves and help fundraise for the program, but additionally, we need help recruiting schools and getting the word out. So if there are folks who are connected to different social clubs, to different organizations that want to work with me on making presentations or going into different schools, that would be incredibly useful. And then of course, just telling the students, going to our website, signing up, following us on social media, and getting engaged. We're really part of I like to think of it as a revolution in education that is taking it out of the classroom, supplementing with the best classrooms around, like the Puget Sound, and keeping kids making healthy, positive choices for themselves and the environment.
So schools you have to have that connection there, and it's always challenging, even sort of with the changes in funding for education, those extracurricular programs, and this kind of, I would imagine, falls into that category. It's not part of the standard curriculum. You need someone to be a champion.
That's right.
So that they have to have some skin in the game. So if someone wanted to help a school where their children were or whatever, how much do they have to contribute or participate in it financially to make it happen?
Yeah, it totally depends school to school. Some schools have a larger budget for extracurricular programming. Some have an active PTA. Here on Bainbridge, we're lucky to have a schools foundation that can also supply additional revenue. Sometimes Rotary or Kiwanis step up with some additional scholarship funding. So really talking to us about what opportunity you've got, we very rarely turn people away. So if a school comes to us and it's a funding challenge, we would love to work with them on how to solve that. But it really does take some forethought. We have some teachers, for example, one of our favorite teachers, Nat Smith, over at the Options program in Kingston, he starts funding for a program they do every 2 years as soon as the first program is over. He has those kids make a presentation to the school. They raise funds through bake sales. We raise funds through our events. We put it all together and we give the students an incredible experience.
Well, very cool. So what would you say is probably one of your, how long have you been with the organization?
I've been there 7 years. Yeah.
7 years, okay. Is there a moment that just sort of, crystallized your kind of resolve and your passion for this type of work?
Wow, I've been in this obscure space for a long time. And so for me, it started when I was 7 years old. And I grew up on the coast of Maine. And as many Mainers do, they juggle a lot of things. My dad was a part-time fisherman. We used to pick periwinkles, little escargot. And I remember being out on a ledge, and my old man was taking a little too long to come back, and the tide was coming up around my ankles. And I just remember having this incredibly peaceful moment out on this ledge where the water all around me, I really felt connected to this place and to this opportunity. And I've been an avid water person ever since then. And for me, there's something very vital in giving kids exposure and confidence. Especially, we live here on an island. We live in a region defined by water. If students don't engage with it, if they're not curious about it or confident about it, I think they're missing the best game in town. So for me, those seeds were planted at a very young age. And for the last 20 years, ever since I left working as a science teacher, I've wanted to provide those opportunities to kids that wouldn't necessarily get them.
So your career did take you into the sciences.
It did.
And so that being out on the coast of Maine kind of was the start of that. What was your science role, or in terms of education, what aspect of?
I think my science, I think for me, I got into environmental science when I realized that it could marry a lot of disciplines together.
Okay.
It's very applied, so you can see that the questions that you're asking have a direct implication. How does sun affect? How does turbidity affect? How does acidity affect the plants that I'm looking at? It has a very applied and relevant story. And I remember very clearly in college when I was taking, entry-level programs, taking a biology class where the teacher brought us out into the mountains of Colorado and had us look at moss and lichen. And there was this moment where the lights went on for me, and I realized that was hooking my interest in an applied and real way and giving me an opportunity to be outside, make healthy choices, to think about the way that I was behaving in the ecosystem so that we could preserve it.
Yeah.
And perhaps as a Muir, I've got a little bit of conservationism in my bones, and this work plays into that as well.
So is one of your duties to sort of create the curriculum, or who does that? How does that take place?
So we have the benefit, again, of having been established for a long time. We've had some very thoughtful people, both on an education committee at the board level and on staff, who've created the curriculum. And then it's been iterative with the teachers' feedback. We've had several grad students from UW looking at our curriculum and thinking about it. I employ an education director whose responsibilities are steering the curriculum, but then also interfacing with the schools and meeting their needs. And as things like next generation science standards have rolled out, as the priorities of the school curriculum has changed, we've made adjustments. But one of the really exciting things about Salish is that our curriculum was very forward thinking. And while some of the language and the buzzwords of the time change, the idea of getting kids engaged in the scientific process, the scientific method, using inquiry-based education to get them interested, that's all very applicable even 21 years later, and perhaps even more so now.
Do you have partnerships with other organizations, sort of like Western Washington University now has taken over sort of the programming of the marine science in Paulsbo. Do you partner with other institutions to?
We do indirectly and on individual programs directly. So primarily our partnerships are with the schools and then with the foundations and funders that support us. But we work with a whole bunch of other nonprofits on shared programs where we might do a day at Friday Harbor Labs as part of a 5-day program. We might have our students spend a day, if they're interested, following our program at the Seattle Maritime Academy or at Islandwood or at any of these other programs. We share a lot of staff training, so our instructors who are then, spreading the instruction onto the students, during our staff training process. They're at the University of Washington in the Applied Physics Lab. They're at Islandwood. They're at the Puget Sound Restoration Fund. And often those people are bringing their expertise to us. In turn, we take them out on the boat and teach them how to teach in the marine environment.
So I know one of the challenges, having spent many years in the not-for-profit sector myself, is that often, I don't know, for people mean well, but we tend to get the cast-offs, the sort of the used equipment and that type of thing. So I would imagine your program being fairly equipment centric. I mean, in some ways, to do the experiments and gather the data. Is that a big part of what you end up having to sort of equip, maintain, fundraise for? Do you get donations from universities or other folks that are upgrading or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a significant piece of our budget. That said, we find that it doesn't have to be the most complicated and sophisticated equipment, particularly for the younger kids, because we want them to be able to operate it. So I would be somewhat foolish to give them a $20,000 CTD to deploy over the side of a ship when they could take water samples and use probes to do the same tests on deck. So we tend to use slightly more user accessible equipment, which sometimes comes at a lower price point. The more expensive stuff that we do have tends to be donated. But you know, we have some very generous supporters who have lots of equipment. Yeah, if equipment were $1 million bills, we'd, if there even is one, if equipment was $100 bills, we would be in a different situation.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. So I've asked a lot of questions. Is there anything that I haven't asked, a point that you want to make sure that our viewers today actually take home?
Gosh, I think just that we are so lucky to be in this place here in Western Washington, where so many people are thinking about solutions to things like climate change and ocean acidification, and where it's such a leading tech hub with so much talent globally coming here. We would be doing a tremendous disservice to our own kids right here if we didn't engage them in understanding both STEM fields, but also the marine environment right here, because it's incredibly sensitive. It's at a pivotal point right now, and I think we should all make it a priority to engage with the environment and figure out what we can do to diminish our impact upon it.
So and you mentioned STEM, so that kind of leads me down another path of really understanding. So a lot of the programs, this really gels with that in terms of our ability to compete in a very global way, being able to get youth connected and excited about science and an element of science, as you said, all around us. What really have you experienced a lot of sort of those stories maybe you hear back from teachers or educators? It's like, I don't know what you did on the trip, but all of a sudden it was a game changer for X, Y, or Z student.
Absolutely, all the time. More than we give a very thorough pre and post evaluation that spits out all sorts of fascinating charts and graphs. More than all of that quantitative stuff, the power of our program is held in the narrative testimonials that we get from the teachers, from the parents, from the kids themselves. I know one teacher in particular says it's the best opportunity he gives his students in their entire high school career.
Wow.
And so that's really meaningful. Knowing a handful of students that I have kept in touch with, who have engaged with us over and over again, it's amazing how powerful something like taking a student out on a ship onto an island to do science research in this mysterious space that they've never been in, how powerful that is to a little kid. They remember it forever. And the kids that then go on in that field and tell us about that, you asked earlier, what's the reward? That's the reward.
Yeah, well, perfect. I couldn't sum it up any better than that. So Seth, thank you so much for being part of the program today. I think that we had an opportunity to take a dip under the surface of the water to understand a little bit more about the program. There's still a lot more that we can probably really delve into, but I would encourage anybody watching today's program to make sure that you check out the website. We'll have the link at the end of the program, but learn all you can. Figure out how, if this is something that sparks your passion, get in touch with them and see how you can get involved. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.